just how good is this offensive line going to be? I get where they're trying to go, but how good do you think this unit can be?
They're the third biggest offensive line as of right now in terms of total weight across the board. If I had to make a bet on the best rushing offense in the league this year, I don't know who I would pick above the Rams.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
May be the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Let's stick in LA with the next offensive line I want to hit on, which is the Rams. I think this is a very fascinating offensive line to talk about, Brandon. For one, the big talking point as soon as they re-sign Kevin Dotson, they bring in Jonah Jackson. I said it. I'm sure you said it. Everybody said it. Like, man, look at the beef that they've got there from, right guard to left guard. The left guard to center, right guard combination is very heavy. It looks like they're signaling we are going to be a power run team, doubling down on the identity shift from last year. So that seems true, right? But the question, Brandon, is like just how good is this offensive line going to be? I get where they're trying to go, but how good do you think this unit can be?
Man, I think they could be very good this year. So I'm really high on them, and it's because of the confidence that I have in Sean McVay and him designing, a really high end offense with knowing how to use motion, knowing how to use tempo, knowing how to manipulate defenses to the level that he does, and knowing the direction that he's been going into the last couple of years, especially last year with that gap downhill sort of run scheme. And now this being kind of the culmination of it with what they did, adding Jonah Jackson in free agency and moving Steve Avila inside to center, it gives them what I think is the biggest interior trio in the NFL. They're the third biggest offensive line as of right now in terms of total weight across the board, which is a far cry from what they were even last year. I think they were the 23rd biggest offensive line last year, and now they're the third. So they took just a kind of a total 180 in that regard, just in terms of pure size, and it just fits with what they want to do. I also think these three guys on the inside are not just big, but they're also very good players. With Jackson, Avila, and Kevin Dotson. So that's the nucleus of the offensive line. I think right tackle is solid and Rob Havenstein. The real question is left tackle, Alaric Jackson, especially in pass protection. But I just don't know how much of a factor that's going to be in this offense if you have one weakness, and his weakness is in pass protection, when you're really like a high-end rushing offense like I think they're going to be. So I feel very good about this offensive line because of that interior three. It's kind of built in some ways like the Chiefs, who are built from the inside out on the offensive line. If I had to make a bet on the best rushing offense in the league this year, I don't know who I would pick above the Rams, honestly. So
I love it. They were number 2 last year in success rate on man gap runs, according to Fantasy Points data tracking. That makes sense when you watch them last year. And again, they doubled. Now this is a double down on that identity where they were doing those man gap concepts. Clearly, if they're going to be, the biggest offensive line in the league, that is sort of, it's a remarkable transition from what they were doing in 2017 when Sean McVay arrived, and even just like 2-3 years ago when they won the Super Bowl. This is a very different run scheme that they're going to want to throw out here. And I think that's fascinating to then consider how this affects the wide receiver room, Brandon, because when I look at this receiver room, I see 2 guys and then I see a drop off. Really. I see obviously Puka Nacua, who had a fantastic rookie season. I see Cooper Kupp, who is coming off of definitely an injury-plagued year. I would say if you look at his reception perception results for Cooper Kupp last year, he actually just got that charting profile done. It's not on the site yet, but it's coming, I think, next week. He definitely had a fall off in his ability to beat man coverage coming off that injury, but still a really strong success rate versus zone coverage, 83.3%, which is not quite where he was 2 years ago when he won the damn Triple Crown. He had the second highest success rate versus zone I've charted since 2014, but it's well in line, if not better, than some of like his early career expectations. So I think he can still be, when he's healthy, a quality, probably secondary receiver at this point to Puka Nacua. But then, like I said, there's a drop off after those guys. I think like, Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, these guys, I don't think they necessarily have like another true starter, even though Demarcus Robinson gave them some good moments and Tutu Atwell gave them good moments on the pre-snap cheat motion stuff. But that maps well to a team that's going to want to run the ball and probably play a lot of heavy personnel sets. So I feel like the offensive line and the receiver room kind of gels together with this particular team.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. And especially with how the pass game is designed. I think I heard you talking about this with Robert Mays recently on the podcast, the Athletic Football Show, in terms of just the routes that these guys are asked to run. You know, a lot of overs and crossers, and guys are getting schemed open in terms of the receivers. I don't see that going away, especially if the run game is even more potent or even close to as potent as it was last year. I don't see any reason to see that why these guys can't continue to eat up zone coverage. And I think their tight end has a lot of promise too, if I'm not mistaken, Tyler Higbee. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I don't think that this system necessarily needs a lot of depth at wide receiver to maintain the production that they've had. Now, I think it is important to point out if Nakua or Cup do get injured, then
Yes.
yeah, that does kind of make it a little more fragile. But yeah, just
Two guys
assuming
with
those
injury
guys.
history, like I
Exactly.
mentioned,
Yeah, that's
Cooper
true.
Kupp,
Right.
obviously recent injuries, and then Puka Nakua. The reason he's whoa, what's this guy doing in the 5th round? He just broke rookie records because he had collegiate injuries. So I mean, freaking
Right.
knock on wood. Obviously, we don't hope for that, but
Yep.
the interesting thing with these receivers and the routes, like you mentioned, a lot of over the middle routes. You look at Cooper Kupp last year. In 2022, he ran a slant on 10.3% of the routes I charted for him. That jumped up all the way to 22.7 last year. Again, quick hitting, that's sort of the stuff they want him doing at this point. And then Puka Nakua, his route percentage chart looks like what you'd expect out of like a tiny slot receiver. Dig routes, slant routes, like those are both above 20%. But what's interesting, and I think this is my kind of last point on this offensive line that I want to hear from you. Like we get the over the middle stuff. That's definitely going to be the center of the pass game, play action, the over routes, the crossing routes, beating up zone coverage for sure. But where Cup and Nakua, I think, are interesting, especially, Puka Nakua high out route success rate, but Cooper Kupp, some of his best routes last year were outbreaking routes, even like corner routes, deeper out routes. That's still where I think he's going to make most of his big plays. Is this a group that when they go to some true drop back situations, can they hold up in pass protection? We know they're going to run the ball well, but can they hold up in pass protection to the point that Matthew Stafford can get in a true drop back situation and, okay, I'm getting the ball to Cooper Kupp on this corner route deep down the field?
I don't have as much confidence in that, but I would say that it's they're at a solid level. I would say there, especially just with how effective the run game is probably going to be, and just how that forces defenses to play to kind of clog up the middle, of their defense to stop the run, and not necessarily clog up the middle, but really clog up the box. That's
Totally.
the conundrum of facing a Sean McVay offense is you have to stop the run game, and the run game is typically one of the best in the league, and that just puts advantageous situations out there for receivers. And it makes sense that outbreaking routes would be there for Matt Stafford because of that middle of the field emphasis in so many different ways. But I would say I would look at the quarterback as much as the offensive line when you're trying to predict if true drop back is being able to be executed at a high level. And I think Matt Stafford is definitely one of the best drop back quarterbacks in the league in terms of, mitigating pressure, getting rid of the ball on time, buying time, all the arm angle stuff he could do. So if I'm not as confident in pass protection from the offensive line in a vacuum, all these ancillary factors here, it kind of like ultimately brings me to kind of a solid, like middle of the pack pass protection unit. That's kind of how I see him with like an elite run blocking unit.